Guides here, everybody, with another down and dirty guide to DayZ. In this guide to mission editing in Arma 2 and DayZ, we're going to be looking at how to move around your cinematic camera, as well as how to get your units into a car and also how to make them sit down on the ground. Lastly, we'll also look at how to place down some static objects like a burning campfire and that sort of thing. And that should pretty much wrap up our mission editing series. In the last guide, in our player unit, we had typed in this space exec space double quote camera.sqs double quote in the initialization field of our playable unit. What this does for us is enable the cinematic camera when we preview the game. Now the cinematic camera is controlled just like the alternative editor's camera, except that there's a few little differences. In particular, moving the mouse around doesn't make you look around, it actually makes you move forward or backward, left or right. So first let's adjust some of our controls. Go ahead and hit escape on your keyboard, then click Options, Controls, and in the top drop down, click Bulldozer Controls. And these are actually your camera controls. If you scroll down, you'll see that there's a couple controls for Bulldozer move left, right, forward, back, and also for Bulldozer look left, right, up, and down. So in your Bulldozer move controls, open up each of the commands and click and drag the control out of the window in order to remove that particular control. After you've done that, open up your Bulldozer look controls and put in the appropriate mouse control for that particular movement. So for Bulldozer look left, put in mouse left, Bulldozer look right, put in mouse right, etc, etc. Once you've done that, hit OK to apply the setting, and back in the game, we now have a more appropriate control to our camera. Now, just like in the alternative editor, you can use your WASD characters to still move the camera around. You'll also notice that there's a crosshair in the middle of my screen. To get rid of that, you have to press L on your keyboard. Now, if you remember correctly, in the last guide, we had set our trigger to use radio alpha, so you still can use radio commands when you're in camera view. So let's adjust our angle a little bit here and then press 001 to activate radio alpha and see what happens. Now, just like in the alternative editor, you can press Q to go up into the air or Z to descend down towards the ground. And that pretty much wraps up the camera portion of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and look into how to get our players into a vehicle and have them drive off in it. Now, for the sake of making the map load faster, let's go ahead and delete these zombies. To delete units or basically anything in the editor, just mouse over what you want to delete and hit delete on your keyboard. Once everything is cleared up, let's go ahead and lay down our vehicle. Make sure that you have units selected, then double click right in front of the survivors. In the Insert Unit menu, click Side and then scroll down and click Empty. Then in the Class dropdown, choose Cars. The unit dropdown will now be filled with a bunch of different cars that you can pick from. So we're going to choose something random and we're going to pick the police car. So hit OK. Now our police car is set. Let's go ahead and adjust the position and the way it's facing, and that should be good right there. So to get our unit into the car, we're going to have to actually give the car a name. So double click the car, and then in the name field, let's go ahead and type in car1 and then hit OK. Likewise, the unit that we want to get into the car is going to have a name as well. So double click your unit and then let's name him Unit 1 and hit OK. Now there are multiple ways that we could get the unit into the car. We could either fill in the unit's initialization field and tell him to get into the car just as soon as he loads up, or we can set the piece of code in our trigger so that when our trigger goes off, he'll get into the car right away. So let's go ahead and do the trigger method. Double click the trigger, and in the on ACT dot or on activate field box, you're going to type unit 1 space move in driver space car 1 and hit OK. So let's go ahead and preview this to see what happens. He's a pretty horrible driver. So let's say that we want to have our other units get in the car as passengers. Likewise, we're going to have to name them, so let's name the top unit, Unit 2, and the bottom unit, Unit 3. Then go ahead and double click your trigger, and add a semicolon to the end of the current line, and we're going to type in Unit 2, space, move in cargo, space, car 1, semicolon, and then Unit 3, space, moveInCargo, space, car 1. And you can go ahead and hit OK. So now let's say that we want to place another object, like let's say a burning fireplace. To do that, make sure you have unit selected and double click anywhere on the map. And just like we were choosing a car, make sure that the side is empty. And this time on the class option, change it down to objects. Now we have a whole bunch of different objects that we can add to the game. And in this case, we're going to add campfire burning. And also I want to make my unit sit around the fire when my trigger goes off. So let's go ahead and delete my waypoints and delete my vehicle. And click and drag around my units so that they're all around the fire and all facing the fire. Now the units will act a bit weird, like they'll face the same way or they'll be in the wrong position if they're all in the same group. So you'll need to make sure that you take them out of a group before you try to make them face certain positions. So making sure that you have the group option selected, click each unit and drag away the group line so that they're not in any group anymore. Once that's done, click the unit option and then double click your trigger. And what we want to do is put our SITDOWN code in the onActivate field. Now the code is a bit complicated, so instead of spelling out the code for you, I've put it in the description below. After you put the code in, just hit OK. And just before we hit preview, I wanted to tell you how to change the time of day and the weather. To do so, just hit the Intel box on the upper right hand side, and you'll be given a whole list of options to change the weather, change the fog, or even change the time of day. So to make our units sit down, press 001 on your keyboard to issue radio command alpha and to kick off your trigger. Keep on derping.